What's up, guys? Mr. Dan here, back again for another Hammer film review. This time I'll be tackling the third and fourth films, the fourth and fifth films in the franchise Frankenstein Created Woman and Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. I've been following this series or rewatching this series for Franchise Frenzy, which is a series that was started by the Horror Man, Joe, and Jason from Horrific Nightmares JM. And it has many participants, including Brad from Bronco Juggalo, who's also doing this series. I chose 10 franchises. Some of those guys are doing like 60, 40, a lot. But I chose a meager 10. But I was really eager to rewatch all of these. And previously, I had reviewed The Evil of Frankenstein, the third film, because I had some interesting points I wanted to make about the similarities between that and the Universal Frankenstein's monster and the Universal films in general. In doing so, I kind of summed up the first three films. So that video serves as my review of the first three films. So now here comes 4 and 5. Okay, so both of these are directed by Terence Fisher. You got Frankenstein Created Woman, okay, which stars Peter Cushing, Susan Denberg, and Thorley Walters. And then Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. Peter Cushing again is Dr. Frankenstein. Simon Ward, Veronica Carlson, and Thorley Walters again as a different character. He's a police captain in this. One of the real treats of rewatching that one was, first of all, I forgot how good it was. I always thought it was like they were kind of getting tired by this point. It's a good movie. We're going to get into it, but I've always held Frankenstein Created Woman in high regard. The first time I saw this, it blew me away. So I've watched it a few times since then, and you know, there's not a lot new that I haven't thought of or that I had forgotten. Whereas in many of the other films, I had conflated things together, and I've kind of rediscovered how good they were. So who knows? Maybe the very last film, Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, will be a slight disappointment for me. I don't know. I'm hoping not, but so far, I thought this series was real good, and it's been even better to rewatch. I'm not kidding. It's been really good. These films have ranked very highly in my Franchise Frenzy rankings. So last Friday of the next few months at least, this being April 2024, there will be a Frankenstein movie somewhere in there. So you'll have to see where they rank. Spoiler alert, this is going to be in the top 5 of the next one. Okay, so let's just get into both of these real quick. Both very interesting films. As you know, the film series follows Dr. Frankenstein. Okay, with a different monster, if there is a monster at all, in each installment. Okay, and in both of these films, we're really just talking about, as was the case in the second one, Revenge of, we're really mostly talking about brain transplants here. That's what it is. And there may be some other physical alterations as well, but primarily Dr. Frankenstein wants to transplant a brain. So they had their formula for these films down pat by this point, and yet both the films still managed to be very original. Dr. Frankenstein has his routine down pat by the fourth film, and especially the fifth film. In other words, he sets up a little laboratory somewhere. He's trying to hide. He's already used up the aliases Dr. Frank and Dr. Stein. It still cracks me up. But so he's going by different names. And what I really noticed by the time you get to Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, there's this real element of sort of not just the underclass versus the upper class, because Dr. Frankenstein is highly educated and Cushing is perfect at this, this sort of sophisticated, erudite portrayal, that he often brought to so many of his roles. But it's if you're like a maverick, if you're someone who thinks outside the box, you're going to be ostracized. Okay, so that's essentially Dr. Frankenstein is way outside of the box in his thinking. So in the fourth one, he's in hiding. And he's has an assistant now, Dr. Walters. I don't know what his name is. He has an assistant, Dr. Hertz, okay, played by Thorley Walters. And as is often the case, not always, we'll get to that, Thorley Walters is a little bit bumbling in this one, a little befuddled. He's a down on his luck doctor or scientist or something, and he just marvels at the intellect of Dr. Frankenstein. And there's also a young local guy, I don't know, early 20s, named Hans, who is kind of an outcast himself. He unfortunately had to see his father put to the guillotine when he was a child. So he kind of throws in with them, and he's kind of their assistant. It's almost like he has no place else to go. He has a crush on Christina. Christina is the daughter of a local restaurateur, and she has some facial deformities. So she's an outcast, okay? So you have scenes. So eventually you'll have a scene where these three upper class twits come in, they're almost like fraternity guys. Sorry, fraternity guys. You know what I'm trying to say? A bunch of college guys drinking, basically, is what they are. And Hans is kind of watching them in the restaurant, and because he works in the restaurant too, you know. And eventually they start being rude to Christina, mocking. I think she also might have a limp. I don't quite recall. But he can't take that because he's got such a crush on her. So he ends up giving them a shellacking. I mean, this is a real Donnybrook, okay? They're breaking chairs over him, and he's just, you know, he's got like farmer strength, and it's just like no match, you know. He eventually just throws them around and gives them a whooping, okay? So they run out, and the one lad's father is the health inspector. So there's like, you're gonna be trouble. And Christina's dad's like, you know, he's not happy about it, but he was also kind of proud that Hans stood up for his daughter, I think. Whereas before he was a little bit mean to Hans. As a matter of fact, there's an early scene, and Denberg is great in this. She's fantastic. Not to mention beautiful, of course. Hans comes in the back where she's like preparing some food. And he says, "Hello, Christina." And she turns around, she takes her hair and she covers up her scar. And she says, like, "Hans, you're not supposed to be in here." And just in that little moment, she's embarrassed about her scarring. She's happy to see him, but she doesn't want to like sort of let him know. And she's concerned that he's going to get caught. She conveys so much in that little exchange. It's a really nice scene. Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see what else she did. I know that she was in a original Star Trek episode, and I believe she's in the last film as well. I'm not sure about that. I think she is, playing a different character, of course. So eventually, she commits suicide. Somebody else dies. I don't want to say too much. I think you could probably almost figure it out. She receives a male brain, and her face is also fixed and restored to her complete beauty, or the beauty that she never had, and now she has blonde hair. And it's a classic case of like, she wants to know, who am I? Like, what's going on, Dr. Frankenstein? So he's trying to calm her down and to do experiments on her, but she's got this other brain in her that wants vengeance, and then she's going to get it. So she's not a monster per se. She has a cleaver or a knife, okay? And she's going to do what she's going to do. You know, interesting. It's almost, you know, reminds me like so many movies have got the Frankenstein story. Even I've seen a RoboCop, you know, where he's chilling in the chair and he has a dream or a nightmare, and he wakes up and it's like they can't stop them, right? They can't control them. So that's what eventually will bring the authorities in, and Dr. Frankenstein will have to run. I won't say too much more about that one. Just an excellent film all around. Well, by Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, a couple things have been established. He's full on evil in this one. This one could have been called The Evil of Frankenstein. Okay, he starts off by decapitating someone. So we're not getting bodies from the morgue anymore. We're not waiting for someone to die. He wants a body. He wants a head with a brain. He's going to go get it. So he has a scythe in the beginning, and he straight up decapitates someone. He's wearing a scary mask, and I think that's to compensate for the fact that there's no real monster in this one too, a little bit. But unfortunately, in the beginning of the film, towards the beginning, he gets found out, or he has a scuffle with a guy from the streets who wants to know gets involved, and he's got his routine down now, pat now. Okay, he's got a trapdoor. He dumps the head in there. He dumps all some of his stuff in there. He's also got another whole frozen body he's going to work on. That's got to go. So then he beats it out of there. And Thorley Walters in this film plays the police captain, and he's quite good. He's not really like an old fuddy-duddy, but he does get very exasperated, and there's some just great scenes with him, like people just sort of exasperating him because he's not. He thinks it's probably a doctor, but he doesn't want to say it's a doctor. And everyone keeps saying, it must be a doctor. And he gets very exasperated. He's like, it could be a medical adventurer. Anyway, he's really good in this. So Frankenstein shows up at the doorstep of like a bed and breakfast. And it's run by Veronica Carlson, the lovely and beautiful Veronica Carlson. She's got like a boyfriend or fiance played by Simon Ward. And so Dr. Frankenstein comes in. He comes down into the sitting room, after dinner. And, at first they were like, this new guy's kind of keeps to himself. Well, he comes down and he overhears them talking about, that mean old Dr. Frankenstein, all the crazy things he did. And also Dr. Brandt. He was corresponding with this guy, Dr. Brandt, who also wanted to transplant organs into all these things that were verboten back then, So eventually Frankenstein will try to get in contact with Dr. Brandt, but we'll get to that. So he turns around, he can't help himself, and he gives them like a verbal dressing down. And he's done this in other movies too. And it's just like a beautiful thing to behold. He just crushes them. And, it's, in previous films, you would sort of get on his side and almost forget what he's doing. Not so much in this film. It's actually almost mean what he does. And he's already decapitated someone. So anyway, eventually he finds out that Simon Ward's character is stealing drugs from the hospital that he works at to pay for his mother-in-law's, his soon-to-be mother-in-law's residency in like a nursing home or something because she's not well. And this young couple doesn't have a lot of money. So once Frankenstein figures that out, he just exploits them and manipulates them. And he's a bastard in this. Simon Ward drops a box of drugs and Frankenstein picks it up. And at first he thinks, oh, thanks, I'll just have that back. And he sort of gives it to him, but then he holds on to it. And they're like both holding it. And he looks at it, he's like, cocaine, huh? And he's like, yeah, you're not supposed to have this. And he figures the whole thing out. And then basically, they're working for him now. They set up a laboratory in the basement. They wallpaper over it, make a fake door. He starts mistreating her. He's like, you bring me my coffee and wake me up at 6 a.m. sharp, And then eventually, in one of the most controversial and famous scenes in the whole series, he will sexually assault the Veronica Carlson character. And it's pretty graphic. And, I hope that even describing it that way is not going to get me in trouble with YouTube, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Kind of shocking. Maybe a little controversial. But like I said, he's full on evil in this. I mean, there's just no question about it. Yeah. Wow. So he eventually learns that Dr. Brandt has sort of gone insane. He's not speaking. He needs to get him out, and he works at the same hospital, or he's in the hospital that Simon Ward's character works at. So they have to smuggle him out to do the brain operation, and eventually that's what happens. And then the Dr. Brandt character, let me see if I can tell you who plays him. He was very good. Freddie Jones. Okay. I think Freddie, yeah, he would go on to be in The Elephant Man with John Hurt, I believe. Yeah. Very good performance. Just another classic, like, who am I? What happened to me? What's my fate now going to be? Meanwhile, we met his wife, who, of course, is just grief-struck that her husband is not... Well, the doctors at the hospital say that's it. He's insane. He's not going to be communicative. He's never going to get better. Well, Dr. Frankenstein thinks they're idiots. Of course, the solution is to take his whole damn brain out and put in someone else. But so then he eventually she gets in contact with Dr. Frankenstein, who convinces her that he's making progress with her husband. Of course, his face is covered up. He's bandaged up. And he's using hand signals and things, which is more than he was doing before as far as communication. So she kind of goes along with it. But eventually he gets out, as they often do, right? I mean, they're just not going to be guinea pigs for Dr. Frankenstein. They're going to go out and discover what's going on. What is their place in this world? And he goes back and visits the wife. And it's pretty tragic. He writes her a note. She wakes up and reads it. And then he starts talking to her. She flips out. And that's the movie sort of, the authorities close in on Dr. Frankenstein again, and at the end it's kind of up in the air who lived and who died. I think we know that Dr. Frankenstein comes back for another movie, so he does live, but at the time you don't really know that. And if a lot of this sounds familiar, it is. It's just it didn't occur to me to like halfway through, like, oh, there's no real monster in this. This is another brain transplant story. But it didn't feel stale. You know, it moved along. And it's just, Cushing is so darn good and so mean in this and evil. You know, it's just, there's a development of his character here. It's just fascinating to watch. And, you know, all the supporting characters are so good. Good story. The police are, like I said, Thorley Walters as the police captain is very good in this. It's just really good all around. That's all I have to say. Two very solid entries in the Frankenstein series. Yeah, real quick, guys. Sorry about that. There's a little bit of background noise as we have vehicles passing by. I'm gonna have to get some sound dampening in this room, I think, for the future. And also, I did want to mention the settings and the costumes and everything are all top notch. Once again, some pretty cool laboratory equipment, especially in Frankenstein Created Woman. Not as much in the next one, and not as many gore effects really. But again, you know, we've seen that before. We've seen close-ups of eyeballs and brains. There's some of that. But the story is what moves it along, and Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. So I just wanted to mention that, and thanks. The next one by year of release would be the attempt at a reboot, The Horror of Frankenstein, starring Ralph Bates. I already have a review of that up on my channel. Please check that out. They would, of course, abandon that and go back to Peter Cushing for one more film. So I guess I'll have to do a standalone review of that one when I get to it in a few months for Franchise Frenzy. So come back again for more Hammer reviews. What are your thoughts about either one of these two films? What do you remember about the performances? Which one is your favorite in the series? If you had to pick a favorite, let me know in the comments below. Thanks.